So in this video, I want to answer the question on how is it possible that some people are seemingly printing money online, living life on their own terms, while others are constantly trapped in a 9 to 5 and basically hating their life, right? So if you're anything like me, your YouTube front page probably looks a little bit like this, just a bunch of young people driving fancy cars and making a lot of money and having a lot of freedom, you know, making $5 million a month as a business, or being super creative with how they make their money and basically enjoying their life, you know, not having a boss, seemingly making a lot of money. And of course, there are a lot of fake gurus out there, but I think at this point, it's not really a secret or like something scammy to say that a lot of people are making a lot of money online. However, the reality for most people is looking like this, you know, that you're addicted to social media, you're working in a 9 to 5 job, you basically hate your job, you hate your boss, you're addicted to fast food, and you're basically constantly like not living up to your full potential. And in this video, I want to answer the question of how is it possible that some people are living a completely different reality than others, working for themselves, being financial independent, while others are just constantly stuck in a rat race. And no, this is not another video about buy my course or like do this and that. I actually don't have anything to sell you, but I just want to answer what I learned in the past 10 years in business, and I want to go through the most important mental model that I learned in the past 10 years in order to achieve any goal that you set for yourself. And that is really important to mention here. It's not only about business, but it can affect any area of your life that you want to improve. And I use that exact mental model in order to go from constantly being underweight to actually getting in shape. But more importantly, it also helped me to, break out of this corporate position that I had and turn myself into a 7-figure entrepreneur with leading a team, scaling a business back in 2023, which, by the way, it didn't end up being successful. But if you're interested in that story, watch this video up here. But this video is not about that, because this video is about the mental model that I use in order to achieve those things. And the question that we basically have to ask ourselves is, what is the difference between people who actually reach their goals and people who stay stuck forever? And here on the left, you see maybe some familiar faces, maybe you know some of them. And those are basically people that either they are running successful businesses, they are inspiring creators, they are maybe business coaches, they have podcasts or whatever. They are successful people in that sense. And that means that they probably have reached some of the goals that they set for themselves. But at the same time, we also have here on the right those people who don't reach their goals and who are stuck forever. And maybe they are ambitious, but they're lazy. Maybe they have big goals, but they don't act on them. And in this video, I want to really dive into the difference between those two people. And what I can say right off the bat is that it has nothing to do with being smart, being ambitious, or being ruthless. Of course, those things are quite important factors when you want to become an entrepreneur. But eventually it all comes down to this. Because successful people who build a life that they love or build their own life have clarity and follow through. So they basically know exactly what they want out of life, and then also have a mental model to hold themselves accountable and to actually make progress every single day in order to reach their goals. After I have talked to hundreds of wantrepreneurs, so people who want to be entrepreneurs but aren't so yet, I know that those kind of unsuccessful people sounds very harsh, but they don't really have achieved what they wanted yet, which is why they are called wantrepreneurs, that they are either lacking clarity or follow through. So they either don't really know what they want out of life and basically don't really have any goal. They just know that there's something that they want to achieve, but they haven't really formulated it. Or if the people know what they want, or they have a brief direction of what they want to do, they usually have a follow-through problem, so that they just start super energized and motivated in the first week, but then by the second week, everything is just down the drain, and they basically don't have the follow-through in order to see the results over time. Because most people live their life not knowing exactly what they want. They consistently change plans, they're wasting time running after brief ideas, losing motivation and energy in the progress. And if that sounds anything like you, don't worry, you're not alone, because I was in the same position, watching all those videos. Maybe you watched this guy and then you were super motivated and energized to start a coaching business or a social media agency because he says how much money he's making and you also want the same thing. But then on day 2, you maybe watch another person, you find a day trader who seemingly makes 20,000 euros a month and you get motivated by that. On day 3, you maybe watch a video of this guy and you are super motivated to start your own YouTube channel and grow a personal brand. on and on it goes, but most of the time the others end up richer through the stuff that you buy, but you're left with no progress and even broker than before, because all those people are selling high ticket courses, so you spend a lot of money. And I'm not saying that those courses are not really working or it's not really worth your money spending it, but the problem that most people have when they buy those courses that they don't finish them, they jump to a different idea, and you basically lose all that money, motivation, and progress by just jumping from one idea to the other. So below the bottom line, and what I want to get to with this is that we, in order to actually get somewhere, we need to know two things. And one thing is that we need to know what your goal is. And then the second thing that we need to do is pursue exactly that relentlessly and consistently over time in order to see the results and eventually reach your goals. And of course, you now might be saying this is nothing new. I heard before how important goals are and also how important consistency is. But then let me ask you this one question, because if you already know that, why have you not made progress so far? And the answer to that question for most people is usually that we live in a life full of distraction. And another question that we can ask ourselves is, how can we, in a life full of distraction, energy draining stuff, deception and fake gurus, implement the clarity and follow through we need in order to build the life that we want? And back then I could highly relate to this because I was addicted to social media, doom scrolling all the time. And what happens there is that you see all those seemingly successful people, talking about what they do in order to make so much money, to live a life full of freedom. And, they're day trading and they're starting agencies and they're coaching and they're doing all those kind of stuff. And what happens then is that when you watch too much of this content, that you start chasing other people's goals. And you never really think for yourself what you can bring to the table, what value you can bring to other people in order to benefit from that. So the one thing that we really need to do is, by the way, stop scrolling on social media, obviously, but we have to answer that question on how can I make sure to spend my time on the highest return of investment activity possible. And the answer to that is very simple. It's bottleneck analysis, and that's what we will talk about in this video. So let's dive into it. What successful people understand is that the world is made out of systems. And if we dive into a little systems 101 here, I can tell you that a system consists out of three parts, and that is usually an input, a process, and an output. Some examples for that could be your body, because the input in that case would be food. Then your body has some kind of a process to turn that into energy. Another example could be a company where people invest time, effort, and resources, and then they have some kind of a process here in order to turn that into a product or profit or whatever. Another example could be your relationship. So you invest time, effort, and attention. Then you have a process in your relationship that hopefully gives you the output of love, stability, and growth, or whatever you look for in a relationship. And another thing about systems that we really have to understand is that a system is usually made up of different systems. So when you zoom into one system, another appears. So here you have one system, for example, and then if you zoom in, there is another one opening up and another one. And maybe this is a little bit abstract, so I want to show one example. So you have a company here, which is a system of inputs and outputs. But then if you zoom into a company, a whole bunch of other systems are actually open up. So maybe you have HR, you have finance, or you have operations. Another example could be that you have a marketing department, which then is basically a system in itself, right? So you have an input that you put in, then you have the marketing process, and then you have an output. If you then zoom in there again, then you maybe have inside this marketing department, you have a Facebook ads team, media buying team, and there you have input, which could be maybe some marketing spend or ad visuals or whatever. Then you have the Facebook ads, and you have the output, which is then maybe leads or sales or awareness or whatever you optimize for. But then when you zoom into that Facebook ads sector of this company again, then another system starts appearing, because then you maybe have an ad campaign where you have a specific headline, a specific text, or a specific visual as an input. Then you have the process, and here again the output, which are then some kind of a KPI. So this example should tell you that no matter how big a system is on a macro level, you can always zoom in, another system will appear. And successful people basically understand that the world is made out of these systems, and those systems can be optimized over time. Initially, we talked about bottleneck analysis, and bottleneck analysis is the ongoing improvement of such a system. So if we dive into the bottleneck 101, you will see that we have a system, and the bottleneck is basically the one limiting factor that is keeping a system from reaching its optimal output. So you have the input, you have the process, but the bottleneck is basically hindering the process on reaching your output. So basically, if we're able to take this bottleneck out of the process, the system will, start working much better, and the input will actually lead to the maximum output. So now I want to show you one example that is very famous to basically illustrate how you can unblock yourself, maybe found your own business, get in shape, improving your relationship by solving one bottleneck at a time. And this example is called the naked man bottleneck. Because initially we have a person, a man who is basically completely naked, just spawned in the middle of nowhere. And now we can ask the question, what is his bottleneck? And essentially we just don't know exactly at this point of time, because we don't know what his goal is. So the first bottleneck is to find a goal worth pursuing, because if we don't have a goal, we actually don't know what is holding us back from reaching that goal. Because you see, we don't know what the input is, we don't know what the process is, and we also don't know what the outcome should be. So there can also be no bottleneck. So the first bottleneck that most people find is that they have to find a goal. So now our character has found a goal and he wants to run a marathon. So now he has a goal, running a marathon, but we still don't know what his bottleneck is. And we don't know because he has not made any effort, any progress, so we don't know what is holding him back from reaching that goal. So if there's no input, we cannot really decide what is holding him back from reaching his goal. So the second bottleneck that we have to usually get rid of is to find out what this process is in order to turn our input into our output. And in his case, it's basically to start running, right? Because in order to reach his goal of running a marathon, he just has to put in the miles. So our naked man is starting to run, but after 50 meters, he has to stop running because his feet are bleeding. So the input was that he started running. The process was that he ran for the first 50 meters, but then the bottleneck was that his feet started bleeding, which basically held him back from reaching the optimal output of running a marathon, and he basically couldn't finish the remaining distance. So the bottleneck that needs to be removed is that his feet are bleeding. And then there are multiple solutions to that, but the most straightforward solution is to buy running shoes. So now our character has bought some running shoes and he tries again. And he starts running again, runs after 50 meters and his feet are not bleeding anymore. He has the shoes on. But then after only 100 meters, he gets tackled by the police. So the input was that he started running more. He ran for 100 meters. He actually got further than the first time, so he made progress towards his goal. But then he got stopped by the police because he was running completely naked. He was exposing himself. Someone called the police and they tackled him before he was able to run the marathon. So the bottleneck that he now needs to resolve is that he doesn't get stopped by the police anymore, and his solution is to buy some running clothes. So now our guy, he's trying again, but now after 4 kilometers, he's just basically breaking down because he's out of breath. So again, his input was more running. He actually ran much further than the first and second time, because now he stopped at 4 kilometers because he's out of breath, which basically held him back from reaching his optimal output, which is reaching the marathon and running the remaining 38 kilometers. So in that case, his solution was to educate himself and train harder in order to, get in better shape. So then he continues running, and on day 2 he runs 4 kilometers, on day 5 he runs 5 kilometers, on day 7 he runs 7 kilometers. But then after 10 days it starts getting hard, and he skips one day, he skips the second day, and then the third day he's just basically laying on the couch and not making any progress at all. So now the bottleneck that he needs to solve is that he has no consistency anymore, that he has no accountability, and that he's just not feel obliged to reach his goal. So in order to remove that bottleneck and implement consistency and to eventually reach his goal of running a marathon, he hires a coach to keep him accountable. And now with the help of his coach, he's making some serious progress. He's now crossing the 20-kilometer mark for the first time, almost running a half marathon. But then he starts breaking down, but not due to a lack of fitness, but to a lack of mental toughness. So his input was again training. He ran 20 kilometers as a process, but then his bottleneck was that he had a mental breakdown, which prevented him from running the remaining 22 kilometers. And basically, again, he was not able to finish the marathon. So in this case, his solution was to educate himself on mental toughness. He stumbled upon David Goggins and reading his book on mental toughness and educating himself. So now after all this time, he finally has all the tools that he needs. He has his running shoes, he has his running clothes, he has the fitness level, he has his consistency and also mental toughness. And finally, he's able to actually finish the marathon. And basically what he has done is that he reached his goal solving one bottleneck at a time. So what can we actually learn from this? And we can learn a bunch of things, but the first thing is that bottlenecks have to be solved in the right order. Because most people are just skipping steps without doing the basics. It would be the same thing as this guy just basically starting reading about David Goggins and mental toughness when he hasn't even bought his running shoes. So it's really important to just understand what is holding you back currently from reaching your ideal output, and then solving that exact bottleneck and not jumping the steps, because then you're just wasting your time and you're basically just part of the productivity theater where you feel productive, but you're actually not solving the highest pressing issue that is keeping you from reaching your goal. So understand that you have to always solve the right bottleneck at the right time in order to progress to the next level. The second thing that we can learn from this is that solving problems become easy when breaking them down into bottlenecks. Because what I learned after talking to those 100 wantrepreneurs is that most people are just so overwhelmed when trying to reach their goals. And of course, it's also hard because technically there are a million ways of, reaching your desired outcome if you have a goal. But actually asking yourself consistently that question, what is currently holding me back from reaching the next step? All of a sudden it becomes so much easier and more clear, and you will start solving your problems one problem at a time in order to progress. And that really creates a lot of clarity and helps a lot of people to just really understand what the next thing that they should be working on is. The third thing that we can learn from this is that bottlenecks only present themselves when you have a goal and something that hinders you from making progress. Because when you don't have a goal, you also won't know what is holding you back. And also if you don't make any progress towards that goal and you're standing still, you also don't really know what is holding you back from reaching the desired outcome and what the current bottleneck is. So have a goal and make progress, and then you will figure out pretty quickly what your bottleneck is that you need to be solving. The fourth and final thing that we can learn from this is that consistent bottleneck analysis can be used in any area of your life, because bottlenecks present themselves in any area of your life. Basically every time you're trying to get somewhere and something is holding you back, there's a bottleneck that needs to be solved. So that is all about the bottleneck analysis that I want to share in this video. And I really do believe that if you just master this kind of mindset and constantly ask yourself, what is the bottleneck that I need to resolve, you will just make progress immediately, and then you will start seeing results, and those results will turn into motivation. And then this is basically a reinforcement cycle that just basically gets you ahead and really make you reach all the goals that you set for yourself. So if this video helped you, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to my channel for weekly videos, and see you in the next one.